Well, here we go on a Monday, October 2nd, first Monday of the month. It usually means our Mondays with the Mayor series, and Mayor Andrea Somerville is kind enough to join me. How are you? Did you have issues getting in amongst the snow?
It's a beautiful winter day here in October.
It's the first Monday in October, but as it is one of those situations where it is a little chaotic out there right now, to say the least. I joked with you off the air that I got in before the snow started, and truly I did. It wasn't snowing when I came into work, but shortly thereafter it started to snow. So be careful out there if you're traveling, ladies and gentlemen. I know we've got several things to get to, but most notably, I think the most popular one people want to know about is the listening session starting tomorrow night with the city council meeting. The city council chambers at 6:30 is when you guys will start, and then we're going to get to a couple of the sessions on campus, and then obviously I think maybe the big one is at the rec center coming up on Saturday. But give me your perspective and just what are you kind of anticipating, Mayor Somerville, with these conversations this week?
Well, I think it's pretty clear we want to hear from the community on this issue. This is something that came up this last spring for an initial conversation, and so what we're doing this week is having several opportunities for the public. So that includes residents, long-term residents, students, faculty, staff, every faction of people that live here in Laramie should feel that we would like to hear from them. We need them to come to these meetings and tell us what they think. It's very important that we get this type of information together before we take it to the legislature on November 1st.
And that's when your report is due to the Joint Appropriations Committee. This was kind of a footnote to the university's budget, I believe, towards the end of the session earlier this year. I know you've already we've had plenty of reaction on our social media platform, especially on our Laramie Live Facebook page, but have you guys in the City Council already been reached out to by several individuals?
Absolutely. Starting this spring, we had some contacts this summer, and then in the last week they've started to pick up again. People have called, they're emailing, they're letting the city office know how they feel. But one of the things that's really important to point out, I think, for these listening sessions coming up this week is it's important for UW and the city, I think, to hear how everybody feels about this and what they want to see with 15th Street going forward. It is a city street, but obviously the University of Wyoming is involved in this as well, so they need to be aware of everybody's opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of to join us this morning on the show, I don't want to leave you out of this conversation at all. Ben Wetzel, the ASUW President, is with us in studio this morning. Good morning. Thanks for coming in with me.
Yeah, good morning, Dave. Thanks for having me here.
I appreciate the time. Give me a sense of what you've heard, being the president of the student body on the University of Wyoming campus. What has the discussion been like over there since this kind of got attached last spring?
Yeah, so interesting. I think students are often, I don't want to say disengaged, but live in their world of academics and athletics and whatever else is going on. So in regards to conversation of the politics, I don't think we've heard a lot yet. That's what we're hoping to get out of the listening sessions. What I would say is that it's a current conversation that we hear on campus of the two halves of campus. We see Facebook posts and Snapchats and hear jokes about people saying, oh, I'm on normal campus today, when they're on the western part of campus over 15th Street. We hear that from our athletics members, fine and performing arts, some of our campus partners that are housed over on the eastern side of 15th Street. And so at this point, I don't think we've had enough feedback to really say anything officially, but I'd say that over the years we've heard just interesting dialogue from students about the fact that when they're on that side of campus for their regular day-to-day affairs, when they come over to Prexy's pasture for events, they don't feel like it's their home or it's where they belong. And so it's interesting to hear from, particularly the one that interests me, is our athletics members who travel around the country and the world representing our university, and when they're on our main portion of campus say that they don't feel like they belong there, and it's all because of this dividing street. And so I think it'll be interesting to see where the conversation goes from this, but at this point there hasn't been enough conversation around the politics itself or the actual decision of closing the street at this point.
Well, and that's going to be interesting, because I know from a former student body member back in the day, let's just put it that way, and to now being a member of the community, I think some of the community looks at it and goes, well, there hasn't been a lot of pedestrian vehicle run-ins through the years. And I'll be honest with you, in the last decade, to 15, 20 years, I can only think of maybe one major incident that involved a vehicle pedestrian accident, which is unfortunate, but at least it's not a higher percentage, thankfully. I'm just curious as to if you guys will hear complaints about, or do you even hear that from the student body about having to cross 15th, you know, whether they're coming from the dorms or from fraternity, sorority row or anything like that?
Yeah, so I mean, we do hear complaints about it. We do hear conversation about it. I think you're spot on, and Andy and I've had this conversation before that although safety is something that's often brought up, we really don't see it as a primary concern of this conversation. I think that there's always a concern of safety when you have a high pedestrian area, but the statistics just don't show that that's the major issue at this intersection. I think from a student perspective, the biggest complaint is standing and waiting at stoplights in the snow on a morning like today, and dealing with just kind of the headache, if you will, of crossing that, and then more of, as I said, just that divide between the halves of campus. I think that the safety is always going to be part of the conversation just because that's people's perception, but to me, I don't see that as the bigger issue here.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the halves because I never really thought of that when I was going to school, and so it's interesting that that's part of the conversation now. I guess I hadn't thought about that. Back to you for a moment, Mayor Somerville. Just talk a little bit about, you know, from your perspective, impacts this would have should this come about, what this would do in terms of impacting city of Laramie travel, and even I've heard brought up you know, emergency response and getting to that kind of heart of campus in that area.
Sure, there's several things that we would have to look at and take into consideration. So the first is traffic plan management. If we close 15th Street, that's a major arterial street in the community that would conceivably push traffic out to north-south traffic out to 9th Street and out to 22nd Street. So that would have a ripple effect on the traffic pattern in Laramie. There may be additional projects that come out of that, such as improvements that would need to be done to 9th Street, but that's not something that we have studied yet. We haven't had time this summer to take a good look at that. 15th Street also has a lot of very dense infrastructure under it, so that's part of the conversation. So there's water and sewer and stormwater. There are private utilities like CenturyLink and Charter and all of those that are under the street as well.
Okay.
It's kind of a convergence of utilities under the street in town, being given its center location. And then emergency response, that's always a big one for people right now. We will work on emergency response no matter what the outcome is, but it could have an impact. It may change the way that we route or dispatch. It could potentially have impacts on response times, both to the university buildings as well as residences. But one thing I want to bring to the conversation is, although the footnote says closure to 15th Street, or hints that way, that's not necessarily the only option.
Okay.
So one of the things we want to present at the listening session is that there are several different options. So when this first came to us, we just sat down and we brainstormed with UW and UW staff about, all right, what are the options? So when everybody comes to the listening sessions, or if they log onto the City of Laramie's website, they'll see a potential overpass, a pedestrian overpass, an underpass. They'll see some partial closure options. There's a complete closure option. They'll also see the City of Laramie's improvement plan. So before this footnote actually came out, the City of Laramie had been working on a reconstruction plan for Ivinson that include 15th Street from Ivinson up to Willett. And in the 15th and Ivinson corridor, we actually had already planned some significant pedestrian upgrades. A raised crosswalk area that's fairly large, some re-signalization, some moving around to the crosswalks, that kind of stuff to optimize that pedestrian safety. I don't think there's anybody, although safety has not been the conversation that I have personally heard, I don't think there's anybody that underestimates the need to keep that number of students safe as possible, and we need to have every pedestrian safeguard in place that we can on a busy street with the number of crossings that we have. And the other thing that I want to relay to people is, just because those are the ideas that we brainstormed out, that's not the end. We want to hear other people's ideas.
Okay.
Just in the last week, I had somebody say, what about timed gate closures? What if we put gates down and we close it during the day and we open it back up at night? I have no idea if that'll work, but it's an idea. So we want people, if they have other ideas or other improvements that they think would address some of the issues or concerns, we want them to bring those forward. And they'll have an opportunity to provide that in written feedback or emails a variety of different ways this week.
Okay, so the public is able to comment. These sessions start tomorrow night, 6:30 at the City Council Chambers, City Hall. Then a couple on campus at the College of Law, room 186. I think that's the large move courtroom. That's at noon Wednesday. The Wyoming Union Senate Chambers at 12:30 Thursday, and then out at the Rec Center. How are we looking at kind of the process that these meetings are going to kind of go along? I guess, what's the framework, I guess?
Sure. So people should feel free to come in at any time. Hopefully within the first hour. I think we can go 2 hours if we need to on each of these meetings. So we'll start the meeting with just some brief introductory comments, probably less than 5 minutes if this is kind of what's going on. We'll open the floor to comments from the public. We'll give them a chance to kind of mill around. We're going to have posters and stickers available, so if you don't want to get up and give a public comment to us about how you feel about it, we'll have some stickers that you can go around and kind of tag your choice, or some pieces of paper where you can tell us what your other suggestions are. And of course, people are always welcome to attend these and then email us. And UW and the city will be sharing all of the comments together so that we're all on the same page as far as feedback.
Is there any one particular thing that the university is looking at, Ben, just in terms of some of these suggestions? I mean, obviously, you brought up, waiting at stoplights in a morning like this. That was never fun when I was going to school, but, in a snowstorm, but you just kind of live through it. I mean, have there been previous discussions of whether it's a footbridge going over or maybe some tunnel system under or anything like that with the UW folks prior to this discussion?
Yeah, so the session that Andy mentioned where they came up with a lot of these thoughts was a joint work session between the university and the council, and so there's a presentation. I'm not sure if it's online. It is online. Okay, the presentation's online and notes kind of all of these options, and so we've been involved in all the conversations of the different possible options. In our office, we've been really trying to emphasize to people the point of having a 15th Street remodel conversation, not a closure, and that's not the only option. And so I think what we've really been trying to do is look at some different institutions across the country that have dealt with this issue previously. As Andy mentioned, the gate, I believe it's the University of South Carolina, already has a gate in place, and they do this. It's like 7 a.m. It closes and opens back up around 5 p.m. and they share a street between the state capitol and the university, and they close it in the middle of the day. And so there's a lot of different options, and so I think that's the big thing we're trying to get across, is that it's not necessarily going to be a closure as much as we want to just do something different to ensure that we're addressing some of the issues around this area. So I think in regards to kind of more your question as far as waiting at the stoplight, I think there's a lot of different ways we can go about that. I know I've already heard some pushback on the overpass. I think kids are naturally opposed to having to walk up a flight of stairs and back down a flight of stairs. I know there's designs that would incorporate this, but some already said, what about in the winter? Is there going to be snow on the stairs? Is there going to be ice? I think we can deal with that, but kids' perception is not the greatest for the overpass. I think the underpass is probably really what I've heard would be our best option if we didn't go down a route of closure. But we'll see where it goes from there, and I think it'll be interesting to see where the feedback comes back on this.
Yeah, it really will be. Now, do you anticipate some pretty good attendance on the university sessions on campus? And I'm not trying to necessarily say that the public shouldn't attend those, but sometimes it's a little easier for folks that are already on campus to get to those rather than the public. I mean, come on, let's face it, we all know that there's parking issues on campus, so I'm not going to lie about that. So, I mean, are you hearing that you're going to get a good response, or is this just kind of wait and see what happens and turns out Wednesday and Thursday?
I think we've got some interest already. We have had some emails and some questions about the sessions, which is a good sign. People are noticing, and we're hoping to get them there. We've done kind of our standard advertising as far as posters around campus, sharing it on listservs with different faculty and different staff listservs, as well as student listservs, social media posts, some of our normal routes. We are offering, as is always kind of the bait for college students, we've got free food and free drinks at the location, and so trying to kind of lure them in. One of the things that I think is kind of interesting to note is, as you were kind of shocked when you said it, we're using Law 186. It's not often that things are hosted on that side of campus, and that was pretty intentional. With the conversation that around the two halves of campus, we wanted to house one central to East Campus so that those athletics members, law students, fine and performing arts, kinesiology and health, some of those more secluded areas have something central to them. Our senator from the College of Law actually in conversation said, wow, there's something in the law building for once. You know, I don't have to come to the other side of campus. And so I think that's kind of a unique part of this situation. We're really hoping to see some good involvement from the students who are on the eastern half of campus.
Oh, that is good. Well, and more continues to be developed over there between the High Bay Research Center. I know there's that kind of the visual arts building over there on the corner of Will and 22nd that is just a couple years old. So there does continue. I mean, there's not very many places to build in the other part of campus. So a lot of it has gone towards the eastern side. So, well, I appreciate you coming in and sharing that perspective this morning.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So, turn my conversation back to you here as I don't necessarily want to get away from this because it is an important discussion, but are there any other major things coming up facing the City Council? I know one of the big things was how you guys dealt with the $500,000 budget shortfall. Give me kind of a synopsis in terms of how you think that kind of recap concluded, so to speak, a couple of weeks back now.
Well, we did approve some budget transitions a few weeks ago at the last business meeting in September, and it was everything that we talked about. We cut those projects, Scout PAR, pushed back the aquifer protection, monitoring wells. We have scaled back on services. We're holding positions. So we'll see how this works. We're asking people for patience, and we're trying to keep everything together as best as we can right now.
And you talked about services. One of those impacted possibly snow plowing, which on a day like this, I'm sure people are loving to hear that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm sure that the city will be out running snow plows. We're supposed to get 3 to 5 inches, and so
that's significant.
Yeah.
Anything else coming up on the radar here, real quick?
Actually, real quick, and it's real important. Tomorrow night on the City Council the City Council will be accepting the resignation of Ward 1 Councilor Vicki Henry.
Oh.
She is moving out of town, out of state, because of family issues or matters she needs to attend. So starting on Wednesday, we will be accepting for the next 2 weeks an application for Ward 1 City Council member.
So basically kind of West Laramie, basically.
Yep.
Because you got to think of the ward system divided 1, 2, 3,
Wait.
1 west, 2 middle, 3 east, basically is how I kind of divided
Kind
up.
of. Ward 1 is geographically the biggest ward, so it includes West Laramie, the West Side neighborhood, and most of the Tree area all the way to 9th Street.
Oh, wow.
So all of downtown and most of the Tree area to 9th Street. It gets a little funny on the north end, north of Harney. That's actually Ward 2.
Yep.
And then on the south end of Ward 1, we kind of jut under the south end of Ward 2. So there's a ward map. If you're not sure where you live, the City of Laramie has a ward map on its website. I want to encourage anybody that's interested, please feel free to call the City Manager's office with questions. You call council members in your wards, but if you have questions about what the job looks like, but we'd like to get as many applicants as we can. The City Council will finalize an interviewing process tonight as well after we accept her resignation.
Okay.
And it's going to go pretty quick, so hopefully we're going to have somebody in that seat by mid-November.
All right, so well, I appreciate it. I will let you guys both go. Thanks so much for coming in as usual on your Monday, and thanks Ben for joining us again here this morning.